All right, plant reproduction. Today we're talking about sexual reproduction. Make sure you've got this note sheet in front of you. So flowering plants can reproduce asexually or sexually, which is different from most animals. Sexual reproduction, remember, we've talked about this before, and the main thing to remember is it involves two parent plants. You have to have sperm from the male part of the flower, which is called pollen, and then an egg from the female part of the flower. That's found in the ovule, and the pollen and the egg have to meet. Once they do, they can produce new plants. Flowers are the reproductive structures that produce seeds. Okay, so flowers, I'll say it again, are reproductive structures. Flowers are the parts of plants that make more plants. Flower petals are often colorful or smell good, and that acts to attract insects and other animals. You'll notice that we've talked about how animals can help flowers spread their seeds. So flowers usually contain both male parts and female parts. The male parts are called the stamen, and the female parts are called the pistil. So let's talk about the female part first. The pistil is made up of three main parts. The stigma, which is the sticky top where the pollen grain lands, so that's going to be up here. The style, which is the stalk, and the pollen is going to travel down that stalk, you saw in the last video, producing a pollen tube. Okay, so that stalk grows down after pollination happens. And then the third part is the ovary, and the ovary is the part that contains the ovules where the egg cells are produced. So let's watch this fertilization video.
Now we know the purpose they serve. Let's look at how flowers are put together. Here's a lily, a typical flower. It, like many flowers, has both female and male parts. The rod-like structure sticking out from the center is called a pistil. The pistil is a flower's female part. The structures around the pistil are called stamens. They're the male part. Together, as we'll see, pistils and stamens make it possible for flowering plants to reproduce. This is a close-up view of the ends of the flower's stamens. Called anthers, they produce special reproductive cells called pollen grains. And here are some pollen grains as they look under a microscope. Pollen grains produce sperm, the male sex cells. They carry 1/2 of the genetic material needed to produce a new plant. As we'll see later, pollen grains serve as a plant's genetic messengers. It's really amazing just how much pollen some flowers turn out. Some common flowers produce as many as 1 million pollen grains a day.
Some of you who have allergies, you know what they're talking about. Pollen can cause a lot of people to have very bad allergies. So plants can produce a lot of it.
All that pollen means a field such as this can be really bad news for allergy sufferers. It's fabulous, on the other hand, for bees and other pollen eaters. We'll talk about flowers as food shortly. Right now, however, let's take a look at our lily's pistil, or female part. Its tip is called the stigma, and the style is its neck. The ovary is located here, at the pistil's base, at the back of the flower. If we could look inside the flower, we'd see that the ovary houses ovules. Ovules produce a plant's eggs, or its female cells. They contain the other half of the genetic material needed to produce a new plant. For flowering plants to successfully produce seeds, pollen and the genetic material it contains must move from an anther to a pistil. When that happens, a long tube grows down the pistil from a pollen grain to the ovary. Male genetic material from the pollen then travels down the tube and fertilizes or joins with an ovule or female sex cell. The fertilized ovule then develops into a seed, and the ovary surrounding it matures into a fruit. We'll talk more about fruits shortly.
Okay, so you've got the pistil, which is made up of the stigma, the style, and the ovary. So here we are. We've got the female part is the pistil. Up here we have the stigma. Pollen is landing and forming this pollen tube right there. This long part is called the style. Then we have the ovary and the ovule. Okay, so this would be the ovary. There you go. Let's look at the male part. The male part of the flower is called the stamen, and it has two parts. It has a filament, and then it also has an anther. The filament is this stalk, and the anther is at the top of that, and that's what produces the pollen. And the pollen is what contains the sperm cells. Okay, so the filament holds the anther up, and the sperm is produced inside those pollen cells. So if we wanted to label this, the male part of the flower is the stamen. Notice the word men. That can help you remember that the male part of the flower is the stamen. This top part would be the anther. These little parts here are the pollen grains, and this long stalk is the filament. Okay. If we look at them both on the same flower, here you have it. You've got little petals around here, 3 petals. Then you've got, these are called sepals. These are like kind of beginning leaves. The ovary, style, stigma together, that's called the pistil. And then the male part made up of the anther and the filament, and together, that's called the stamen. And there you have it. Those are your notes for sexual reproduction.